Some movie stars become household names, but others deliver performances just as explosive, just as skilled, and yet most audiences never learn who they are. You've seen their fight scenes, their physical precision, their screen presence, and the way they elevate entire films with pure talent. But Hollywood fame isn't only about ability, it's about marketing, timing, distribution, and whether the industry decides to build a name around you. Today we're breaking down some of the greatest movie stars you don't know, starting with the ones who proved they belonged at the top of action cinema, even if mainstream recognition never fully followed. Jet Li is one of the clearest examples of a world-class star whose Hollywood legacy never matched his actual level. Long before American studios cast him, he was already a martial arts champion and a major film presence. When he entered Hollywood with Lethal Weapon 4 in 1998, audiences immediately saw something different: speed, control, and authenticity that few action performers could match. He followed with leading roles like Romeo Must Die, where studios packaged him for Western audiences, but often limited what made him truly special. Jet Li had the skill to become the central action icon of an era, but Hollywood frequently treated him as an exotic weapon inside someone else's formula rather than a full star with his own cinematic identity. Despite international fame, his Hollywood positioning never fully reflected his stature. Tony Jaa's rise was even more sudden and dramatic. Ong-Bak in 2003 hit like a shockwave because it reminded audiences what real physical action looked like. And Tony Jaa performed stunts with minimal reliance on visual effects, bringing back a raw, bone-crunching intensity that felt almost impossible in modern cinema. He wasn't just fighting on screen, he was redefining what action choreography could be. For a moment, it seemed inevitable that he would become the next global martial arts phenomenon, but international breakout doesn't guarantee long-term Hollywood dominance. Studio structures, production issues, and the difficulty of translating a uniquely Thai action style into the mainstream franchise system slowed his momentum. Tony Jaa remained a legend to action fans, but the industry never fully turned him into the global household name his talent suggested. Then came The Raid, one of the most important modern action films ever made, and with it, Iko Uwais. As the lead, Iko delivered a performance built on Silat, a fighting style rarely seen with such clarity and brutality on screen. The Raid wasn't just entertaining, it was a reset for action filmmaking, proving that choreography, pacing, and physical realism could still feel revolutionary. Iko's presence was magnetic because he moved like a real fighter, not an actor pretending. Yet even after Hollywood noticed him, mainstream stardom remained elusive. He appeared in international projects, but the industry often placed him in supporting roles rather than building films around him. His work influenced action cinema globally, but his name still isn't widely recognized outside dedicated fans. Joe Taslim, whose full name is Johannes Taslim, represents another version of the same story. He also appeared in The Raid, bringing intensity and credibility that instantly stood out. Unlike many martial arts performers, Taslim crossed into major franchises, appearing in projects like Fast and Furious 6, Star Trek Beyond, and Mortal Kombat. He has the look, the physical ability, and the screen presence of a leading action star, yet Hollywood continues to treat him as a high-value addition rather than the centerpiece. Taslim's career shows how the industry often imports talent from abroad, uses it to strengthen big productions, but rarely hands that talent the full spotlight of true stardom. What connects these stars is not a lack of ability, but the gap between skill and industry branding. Jet Li proved he could carry films, but Hollywood boxed him into narrow roles. Tony Jaa stunned the world with authenticity. But the system didn't sustain his rise at the highest level. Iko Uwais helped redefine modern action, yet remains undercredited in mainstream culture. Joe Taslim keeps appearing in major projects, but still hasn't been elevated into the kind of name audiences instantly recognize. These are not forgotten performers, they are hidden giants of action cinema, respected deeply by fans of the genre, yet never fully embraced by the Hollywood machine that decides who becomes a global movie star. Scott Adkins is one of the most obvious examples of a true action star living just outside the mainstream spotlight. If you've watched modern martial arts cinema at all, you've seen him. His defining role came as Yuri Boyka in Undisputed 2, a character that quickly became iconic among fight film fans. Adkins combined athleticism athleticism, flexibility, striking ability, and a level of screen combat realism that most Hollywood stars simply do not possess. Boyka wasn't just another tough guy, he was a fully physical performance that made audiences believe every movement. Adkins built a career around delivering consistent, high-level action, yet Hollywood rarely treated him as a true A-list lead. Instead, he became the king of the underrated action circuit, respected in the genre but kept outside the major franchise center. The reason is structural. Adkins thrived in films that were often labeled direct-to-video or niche, even when the quality of the action far exceeded what big-budget movies were offering. Hollywood's star system depends on marketing and box office perception, not purely on talent. Scott Adkins became famous in the world where action fans live, but not in the world where studios invest hundreds of millions into branding a face. His career proves that being one of the best fighters on screen does not automatically make you a mainstream celebrity, even when audiences consistently respond to your work. Donnie Yen occupies a different space, a legend who achieved global respect but was still underused by Hollywood for much of his prime. Donnie Yen's defining breakthrough for modern audiences was Ip Man in 2008, where he portrayed the Wing Chun grandmaster who trained Bruce Lee. The film turned Yen into an icon and elevated martial arts cinema into something emotional, disciplined, and powerful. Donnie Yen was not just fighting, he was acting through movement, embodying restraint, honor, and intensity. His choreography, speed, and control made Ip Man one of the most influential martial arts roles of the 21st century. Yet despite his status, Hollywood often treated Donnie Yen as a specialty ingredient rather than a leading force. He appeared in major Western productions later, but for years, American studios failed to recognize what Asian cinema already knew. Donnie Yen was one of the most complete martial arts stars alive. His career highlights how Hollywood's gatekeeping can delay recognition even for performers who are clearly legendary. Ernie Reyes Jr. represents another kind of hidden stardom, one rooted in cultural memory rather than celebrity branding. Reyes became known through projects like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where martial arts performance and stunt work were essential to the film's identity. He had the skills, the charisma, fun, and the athletic talent to become a larger action figure, and for many viewers, his presence defined an era of youth-oriented martial arts entertainment. But Reyes' career also reflects how some performers become embedded in cinema without ever being promoted as a marquee name. Hollywood has always relied heavily on martial artists and stunt performers, often using them to create iconic action moments while the spotlight remains elsewhere. Reyes was part of that world, influential, recognizable, but rarely elevated into the category of mainstream movie star. His legacy exists in the impact of the films, even if his name never reached the level of the actors placed front and center. Mark Dacascos is another performer who embodies the phrase, "You've seen him, but you don't know him." With decades of martial arts credibility, Dacascos has long been respected among action fans, and his appearance in John Wick, Chapter 3 as Zero introduced him to a new wave of audiences. In a franchise known for elite choreography, Dacascos stood out because he belonged there completely. His movement, timing, and presence felt authentic, like someone who had been doing this at the highest level for years. But that is exactly the point. He had been. Dacascos spent much of his career as a cult favorite rather than a mainstream lead, showing up in projects that valued martial arts skill, but didn't come with the marketing power of Hollywood's biggest brands. Even when he appears in a major hit, the system still treats him as a standout supporting figure rather than a star to build around. Scott Adkins, Donnie Yen, Ernie Reyes Jr., and Mark Dacascos all prove the same underlying truth. Action cinema is filled with performers who have the ability, dedication, and screen presence of true stars. But the industry's definition of stardom is shaped by promotion, distribution, and the roles studios are willing to offer. These actors didn't disappear because they lack greatness. They remain underrated because Hollywood often celebrates action as a genre while refusing to fully elevate the people who master it most. When you look at all of these names together, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The greatest action stars are not always the most famous ones. Mainstream celebrity is not a perfect measurement of talent. It is often the result of timing, studio investment, media exposure, and the way an industry chooses to package a performer. The actors in this list represent a level of physical artistry that shaped modern action cinema, yet most audiences still cannot name them the way they can name traditional Hollywood icons. Jet Li showed that a martial artist could carry international blockbusters, but Hollywood often reduced his presence into carefully controlled roles rather than giving him the full space his talent demanded. Tony Jaa reminded the world what real stunts and raw physical action looked like, but his rise was never fully sustained by the global franchise system. Uwais delivered one of the most groundbreaking action performances of the modern era in The Raid, influencing fight choreography across the world. Yet his name remains far less known than the impact of his work. Taslim continues to appear in major projects, proving his range and intensity, but Hollywood still treats him as an addition rather than a centerpiece. Scott Adkins became the face of underground modern martial arts cinema, building one of the strongest action resumes of the last 2 decades, yet mainstream studios never pushed him into true A-list territory. Donnie Yen achieved legendary status through Ip Man and decades of excellence, but Hollywood's recognition came late and often in limited roles. Ernie Reyes Jr. represents the performers who helped define action entertainment through skill and stunt mastery, but were rarely marketed as stars. Mark Dacascos spent years as a cult legend and proved in John Wick Chapter 3 that he could stand alongside the best, yet still remains outside the household name spotlight. The reason these careers feel so similar is because Hollywood has always treated martial arts talent in a specific way. Studios love the spectacle of combat, but they often hesitate to build their biggest brands around the people who are most authentically capable of delivering it. Action performers are frequently used to elevate franchises, support bigger names, or add credibility to fight sequences, but the industry rarely gives them the same promotional machine it gives to traditional dramatic leads. As a result, some of the most gifted stars in cinema history exist in a strange space, respected, influential, unforgettable on screen, but still not widely recognized by name. And yet, that is what makes them so important. Uwais, these actors are proof that cinema greatness is not limited to the faces on magazine covers, or the names at the top of award season conversations. Greatness also exists in the performers who change the language of action, who push the limits of physical storytelling, and who inspire entire generations of filmmakers and fighters, even if the mainstream never fully catches up. If you've watched Ong-Bak, The Raid, Ip Man, Undisputed, or John Wick, then you have already witnessed some of the best action talent of the modern era. The difference is that now you know the names behind that talent. These are the great movie stars you don't know, not because they aren't worthy, but because Hollywood never made knowing them a priority.